Hi, everybody. We got a really exciting day today. We've got a free for all. And right now I am with two of my favorite Christians. We have Josh from the Christian Resistance podcast and Andrew Statelites. And we're going to get in here. We're going to open this up to other people. We're welcoming even atheists, agnostics, pagans, Hindus, Muslims, Jews, anybody from any different group who's willing to come in here. We're willing to chat with you. And we're going to talk about what is the truth. How can you find the truth? And so we believe as Christians that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And so we're going to explain a little bit why on that. So without further ado, let me just introduce my friends here. So Josh, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Josh Brister. I run the Christian Resistance podcast. It's very small, so not too much to offer there. I enjoy defending the faith. I think it's important, imperative for every Christian to be able to do that, especially now in the ever-growing secular mindset, or I would say secular facade going on. I think there's a lot of caricatures of what Christianity actually is. And I think the more we tear down those intellectual smoke screens that prevent a person from coming to Christ, then I think that that's ultimately better. And we have a responsibility as Christians to preach the gospel to everybody, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So it's very important that we do evangelism, and I'm glad to be here.
Great. Glad to have you. So Andrew.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrew Statelites. I am mostly on Twitter these days. Some of my interests are philosophy, political philosophy, theology. I am a traditional Anglican, and I've been longtime friends with SJ and Josh, and I'm glad to be here.
Great. So that's fantastic. So it's just wonderful to have you all. So I thought I would just spend a moment just sharing a couple of things that I've been looking at lately, and just to find out what your interests are on these. But we have such an abundance of evidence for Jesus's resurrection, and I think it's fantastic. We can go to the Bible, of course, but we can also go outside of the Bible and find the ancient early church fathers and what they had to say about all this kind of stuff. And then we can go over to the prophecies and fulfilled prophecies in the Old Testament and see some pretty fantastic stuff. But one of the things I thought might be interesting is one angle today is also to talk about the way that scholarship now has sort of gone into the Old Testament to try to cast doubts on certain verses. Like, for example, they are looking at the book of Daniel, saying it's dated really late, or they look at the book of Isaiah and they say it's split out into 3 parts. And that even came about around the year 1145. So this isn't even 80. So this is not a new idea. It's not a brand new idea, but it's not something that was in the ancient times. But what I'm trying to say is I notice that there's a lot of people trying to cast doubts on the validity and the reliability of the Bible. And so and on Christianity. So I was just wondering if you two wanted to offer maybe some of the reasoning for your beliefs, and it doesn't have to be any of the ones I just mentioned, but I was just wanting to mention that. So I am going to, we got Hellbound Heathen here too. So you got Hellbound, you got a little bit of a static going on, just a little bit.
Do I have static?
Yeah, just a.
Let me try to reconnect. Maybe that'll fix.
Just a little bit of background static. So what do you think, Andrew, Josh? Why do you think that other people should, and their logical, plausible, probable also is in the chat here. So that's John Maddox and Parker. I don't know if I put Parker's thing up there, but thank you guys.
Hey, John.
So he's saying that the Jeff Lopelli debate has gotten funny on Twitter. I've missed those interactions. So I was supposed to be hosting. In fact, all these debates I'm supposed to be hosting keep getting canceled. But it was a debate I was going to host with Jeffrey Williams, who's an atheist, and Lopelli is a Christian, and they were duking it out a little bit on, and then they can't seem to come to an agreement on the time. So that's where we're standing right now.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I had to move one of mine. I was just too much stress and anxiety from different things in life. And I had to move one of mine, but I look forward to doing a few in November. So
Yeah, it'd be good.
yeah. Andrew, would you like
Sure.
to go first?
Sure. So I guess there are two ways to look at it. One is sort of the narrative experience of how I came to the adult version of my Christian faith, or the sort of first principles way. And I haven't done my narrative version in a while, so I'll go ahead and do that. So basically, as a young man, I was a very serious philosophical agnostic and skeptic. And basically what I ended up realizing is that if you don't have a grounding to knowledge, things are indeterminate. And you can't function effectively in life with that indeterminates. You can either just be sort of buffeted by your passions or desires at the time, or you can aim to have a coherent scheme of life. And I basically read a bit of Kierkegaard and sort of realized that sometimes you have to sort of take the step into the system before you can fully realize what the system is like. And so that was sort of my first steps into the Christian faith that I currently have, is that sort of stepping into the deep water that Kierkegaard describes, mostly to provide a functional scheme of life and method of meaning. And then from there, I actually developed an interest in philosophy and understanding of it, both from sort of this classical tradition in Christianity, which involves a lot of Greek thought and Platonism, and my prior experience with ancient Greek skepticism of the Pyrrhonian school, and then actually developing thoughts and understanding through Nietzsche, because Nietzsche is actually a religious thinker. He is a little bit hard to understand, and you need a little bit of exterior guidance to read him appropriately. But just sort of fundamentally comes to this, and that's basically the reasons that I believe is Christianity provides this gestalt mechanism for sense making, not only on an individual level, but at a communal and cultural level as well. And and being a good skeptic, I have tried various ways to defeat this, and none of the defeaters have stood up. And so that's sort of a quick summary of my view on it in sort of a narrative way.
I'm sorry, I just want to test, is that static gone, or is it still here?
What do you guys think? Because I hear it a little bit, but maybe I'm
still
just
there.
alone. Okay.
Still there? Okay, all right.
Just trying to figure out. So Josh, what about you? And then we'll go to Hellbound. Even if he has a little static, we can share his story.
Okay. Well, I'm really attracted to skepticism, but when I started to investigate the claims of Christ and Christianity as a whole, and even the nature of skepticism, I found out that I could not be skeptical of my own skepticism. So that made or alerted me to first principles, something that Andrew brought up. And these first principles are like non-being can't come, being can't come from non-being, or the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle, and the law of identity, and also these transcendentals that we all live by, truth, beauty, and goodness. And so I don't think skepticism is the right way, the right path to knowledge. I think it's what the ancients, the Socratics, knew all along. It's justified true belief, things we have good reason, no, though not certainty, but good reason to believe. So when you put the claims of Christ, or when you put the existence of God to the test, what is more plausible? And it seems to me that when you put all these arguments to the test, Christianity, or theism, and then Christianity in particular, wins out every time. And then I started reading, more philosophical writings like Thomas Reid, and someone I like to talk about. A lot, Aristotle. We live as if God does exist, and that is, we live according to the dictates of common sense, things we have good reason to apply. And when you apply causality or these transcendentals, and you look at them in a true way, not overly skeptical, you see that they point to something that transcends our mere cultural milieu. We live as if objective moral values and duties do exist. And in fact, for there to be subjective values, there must be an objective referent to which to have subjective values from. Not everything can be simply subjective in nature. So I've really started to investigate apologetics, and I've been doing this over 20 years now. And I think there is just no reason to be skeptical of Christianity at this point. I think we can know it is true, though we don't have mathematical certainty for it. We have plausibility and probability, and I think that's all we need to have a worldview that's livable.
Very good. Yeah, so I like that idea of a worldview that's livable, and plausibility and probability, and just bringing together what you both said, talking a little bit about the philosophical dimensions of Christianity, and even going back into the ancients and talking about Aristotle and some of the beliefs of the Greek philosophers. And so I think that you guys have good reason. So going over to Hellbound, so he's a counter approach here because he is he's got his different views. So Hellbound, what's your view?
Well, I just want to check the mic. How's the mic doing?
It's still.
Really?
Yeah, it's really static.
It's noisy, but I can understand you.
Wow, I don't know what's going on with it. Oh well. Well, I'll make it pretty brief. So I don't know exactly, because I missed a lot of this fiddling around. So I don't know if you already went over what you're going to call truth. Are you going to call truth empirical and objective, or is it subjective truth?
I would say that truth is a correspondence between the thing in the mind and the exterior reality. So it's a correspondence with what is actual. That's what truth is.
So it's objective truth, and it's empirical. Yes. Okay. Well, good. So now I know. Where we're starting from. So, would you want to know what my opinion of truth is, or?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I see truth as objective and subjective. There's subjective truth, and then there's objective truth. Beliefs fall under subjective truth. You can have a belief that's based on an objective truth, and then it's an objective truth. But a lot of people hold subjective truths, and there's nothing wrong with that.
So could you did you just define subjective truth as a belief, any belief?
Well, okay, I kind of misspoke. So you can have a subjective truth that is, I'm getting a little tongue-tied here. So I consider truth to be objective. But I know that some people have truths that they hold that in reality are actually subjective truths. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we have to, or whoever has to understand that they have a subjective truth. This is not an objective empirical truth.
Right. So what is a subjective truth? Do you mean that's a belief that they hold?
subjective truth is something that you consider to be truthful, but it's not objectively truthful. I mean, it's not an objective truth.
So a subjective truth is any belief you hold that isn't objectively true?
No. Well, I don't know. Maybe my definition of objective and subjective is different from yours.
I don't know what your definitions are. That's what I'm trying to investigate.
I'm going by the dictionary version of I guess I could look it up if you want.
Yeah, if you could look up the one that you're using, that would be helpful. Yeah.
I'm sure Wikipedia's definition of truth is an authoritative source.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter if it's authoritative as long as it's what you're consistent with.
I'm just being sarcastic.
I'll go to the Oxford Dictionary. I think. So
Hellbound, one thing I have to say is that your static is really, really kind of unbearable. I mean, I'm sorry, I can hear you, but it's very, very distracting.
That's okay. I'll step out and I'll just be in the audience. So
I mean,
thanks
if there's
for
a way to
putting
somehow
up
get
with the
rid of
static.
it. No, I
don't know. I'll have to fiddle around and see what I can do. So, but thank you. I appreciate your patience.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I made a video not too long ago. It was a few months ago, and I realized there was a lot of static, and I had people in the audience who were complaining and on my comments and stuff, and I thought I just trying to make it a little more clear for people.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I was once in a dialogue, and unfortunately, it was my mic that was the problem, and I felt like they had better technology in Afghanistan than what I was using at that point. So I think, we need to check our mics before we go on. So.
But he is. I can see. I'm trying to sum up the gist of his points without him, which might not be fair. But it's his. I think it's true to me, but it might not be actual truth, is what he might be saying. And I don't know if that's the.
Yeah. So and there are different models, and I'll just use the model that I like to use, and Mr. Heathen might agree or disagree on its appropriateness, but. Basically, truth or falsehood is best understood as a property of propositions. And a proposition is something like SJ is a brunette, right? That's a description of some state of affairs. That can either be true or false. And truth or falsehood is a relation between the proposition and the actual reality, right? And the thing with all propositions is they're subjectively held. That they're held by some subject. That's like, oh, I believe that SJ is a blonde, or Alice believes that SJ is a brunette because she once saw her at a Halloween party and she was in a costume and assumed that was her natural hair color, and that is sort of the interesting part of epistemology, is that we have lots of beliefs that have different grounds, right? And epistemology is basically the study of how do we form these beliefs and what makes them reasonable or unreasonable.
Yeah.
And to use another example, there's a comic book of this teenage girl who is going to her bedroom with a male friend, and she tells her mother, "Oh, don't worry, he's gay." And the mother says, "Oh, okay, I'll believe you." And then they get into the bedroom, and the male friend says, "How did you know?" And she told the truth, but she thought she was lying. And even though she lied, and that's not actually good for her mother to believe it, the mother actually ended up believing the true thing for the wrong reasons, which is probably not related to our topic at hand, but I thought it was sort of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. So the question is, if he's back. Hellbound's back. Maybe he's fixed this issue. Here we go. You're back.
I hope so. Is the static gone this time?
I think it's worse.
It's worse? Really? The static is worse?
Is it on are you on a cell phone or?
No.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise. It sounds like your line isn't grounded, and it is actually worse.
Sorry
It
about
kind
that.
Oh,
it kind of sounds like he's in Chad, Africa, or something. Couldn't really understand him.
So that's a tough situation. So
But on the nature of truth, I do think in our understanding, I do think it really is. Um, um, it is. We can't find a neutral position, and a neutral position that the secularist often presupposes, quote unquote objective position. We can't get outside of our minds, so it's all going to be going to have that element. The question is what someone says, or the claim that they're making, or the statement that they're saying, is it true or not? Or is it, of course we have some subjective, we have a lot of subjective views, but not all of them are subjective. We can have objective truths also, and there is no such thing as just an objective vantage point where we can find that isn't that stands outside there, and we can differentiate that between a subjective viewpoint. It all goes
well, yeah.
to
I think what you're saying is, for example, I have 4 trees outside my house. There are 4 trees that wrap around the house. That's objective. It doesn't really matter what somebody's opinion of it is. If somebody comes up and says, no, I only see 3 trees in front of your house, and I can objectively say, no, there are 4 trees. It's a stance independent truth. That's how they define something like objective morality. They say it's stance independent. Morality stands there. It doesn't matter what John thinks about morality or what Susie thinks about morality. It's still there. We have objective moral values and duties, for example, to do what's right and to value life and liberty and justice. So Hellbound's back. Trying again.
Let's hope so. Okay, is the static still there?
This is better. What did you
a
do?
lot better.
Well, what it was I changed the setting in my computer, but I didn't change it in SteamYards. So I'm actually going through my Yeti mic before I was going through the headphone mic. So.
Yeah, this is a lot better.
Oh, good. So sorry about that. I appreciate your
okay.
patience. So I caught a little bit. It sounds like you were talking about the definition of objective truth. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying the idea of truth standing there is a stance independent reality, and so that's what I would say.
Yeah,
So
and then a subjective truth is just something that you kind of feel
is
is
true, but if it doesn't align with truth, then it really isn't the truth. It's just your false belief.
Exactly, right. Yeah, that's why I wanted to find out what our baseline starting point was for what we were going to call truth. And if we're going to start from a baseline of objective truth, then I think that's a good place to start.
Now, stance independent, I don't know if I agree with that.
That's okay.
Well, this is to SJ. I don't know if I agree with that. I think, anything is going to be, I don't think it matters. It matters if it corresponds to reality.
Oh, someone else is here. Let me see who that is. So no, the reason I didn't make up the term stance independent. I got that from a lot of academic literature on the objective morality. And so they call it, because some people have confused it and called it mind independent, but it's not mind independent, it's position independent. So it doesn't matter what I think about the Hitler in the war, but he killed 6 million Jews. It's my opinion of whether he killed 6 million Jews doesn't matter. He really did kill 6 million Jews. And so there are little things like that.
Hey, I'll be back in 1 second. Michelle?
So we've got PMARS here too.
I think subjective truth is the best truth.
Do you hold that subjectively or objectively?
Okay, well, I think Humans construct knowledge through their intelligence, experiences, and interactions with the world. Therefore, knowledge and reality are human constructs and therefore subjective.
Okay. Then what? Okay, then the question is, what critique can you bring to someone else's constructed knowledge and beliefs if it's all just constructed?
My subjective critique.
And why should that be? Why should they listen to that? Right? Why should they find that compelling?
Because I'm awesome.
I have to give him points for consistency.
I'm not sure why he dropped off, but he's back. I don't know what happened there.
I accidentally hit my cam and it's not hooked up, so it kicked me off when I pressed cam. I meant to press mute, so I didn't hot mic. That's why it kicked me off. But yeah,
I have to give you points for consistency. That's all I said.
'cause I feel like faith, right, is subjective, right? Because I could listen to like your words, right, and hear something that maybe you didn't intend to say, and I can say like maybe that was like God speaking, using you to speak to me, right? But so like that's just my subjective experience, though. So why should that just be an illusion when my whole life I've subjective experiences have shown to be real to me, but then now I'm supposed to because it's subjective, I'm supposed to pretend like it's not real or something? I don't get that. Like,
No, the idea is if it aligns with reality. So if you have a belief and it conforms or it blends in with reality, your belief is actually the truth out there, the stance independent truth and objective truth, well, then your beliefs are falling in line with what reality is. But if you believe, for example, that we're on a flat earth and we've got reality that's shown us multiple pieces of evidence that we're on a globe. And so if you believe that we're a flat earth, it doesn't matter that you held that belief, that this is a long-term belief, that you lived your life that way. It's not conforming to reality.
I don't know. It kind of is, though, because we subjectively experience a flat earth. So in a sense, it does comport to reality.
Oh, who did we lose here? We lost Andrew. So, well, let's talk about, let's switch gears a little bit here. And so let's talk about one of the things that we were going to bring in here is just talking about different belief systems and what evidence is out there in the world to support those belief systems that you guys find compelling. And if I recall correctly, P. Mars, I think you're a Christian, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm a Christian. Yep.
So we've got three people, and hopefully Andrew will come back. Three people who are Christians, and we've got Hellbound, who's got some polytheistic ideas. I believe it's polytheistic, and so we can maybe share what we feel is the compelling arguments in our favor, or the compelling reasons why you believe what you believe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would consider myself more of an agnostic. I kind of went through several stages of belief. I started out as a monotheist and then went towards polytheism, and then I went towards atheistic and kind of now more of an agnostic. So I keep myself open to the possibility that there may be gods and or God, but I just haven't seen enough evidence to sway my mind one way or the other. But as for, I don't know if I would call, because I study the occult and witchcraft and paganism, I don't really consider those. Wicca is more of a religion, but just studying the occult is not much of a religion. I mean, you can be any religion and study the occult. And then there's people who practice the occult. They have different religious beliefs. It's a very strong ceremonial magic community who use the Bible. They use the Bible, and that's how a lot of ceremonial magic is sort of based on, is old medieval Christian ideology. So that's my belief.
Okay. Yeah. So I was in a direct message group with some Christian people that I know on Twitter. And one of the things that was brought up really recently, actually, I was just reading it this morning, is they were talking about, do you think, or do you guys, all of you guys think this, one of the persons in the chat believes that it's sort of, they've noticed trends in the atheist group, like especially people like Matt Dillahunty and all of those other atheists who are out there sort of making a splash. They've noticed, number one, a lot of the people who are affiliated with Matt Dillahunty and the atheist experience have left, like Jen Aldrich and others. They've moved on and they've gotten into disagreements. And some have actually decided that they're taking baby steps back towards theism, but they're using the path of polytheism or paganism. And so some people in that chat thought that that was rather dangerous, while others thought, well, maybe it's baby steps to Christianity if you've got to go through the door of paganism and then eventually find your way to the cross. And so I'm just wondering if you guys have any thoughts on that. Do you think it's better or worse? Is there a ranking system that you would apply on those kind of beliefs?
I think people should find what suits them the best. If you are a Christian and Christianity suits you best, then be a Christian. If Hinduism speaks to you and you identify with Hinduism, then study that. If you are more of an atheistic or agnostic person, then embrace that. I'm not into converting anyone. That's not what I do. I mean, actually, most occult practices and witchcraft groups actually they're actually kind of difficult to get into, because we're not trying to convert anyone. I don't want to convert anyone. If somebody finds a belief, like if somebody is a witch and they study Christianity, read the Bible, and suddenly one day they wake up and they go, hey, you know what? This witchcraft stuff ain't for me. I identify as a Christian. Then they've found their path, and that's their path. And to get in the way of that would be completely against their will. And doing something against their will is one of the things that a lot of witches don't do. They do not want to bend other people's will against their will.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment on that or thoughts? Or the whole idea of and I'll just throw this out there because I figure we might as well make this a little spicy, but how about the idea of right now the government's been in the United States has been releasing a lot of data on unidentified flying objects. I think that's my dog. Unidentified flying objects. And this idea that Hugh Ross has gotten into talking about residual UFOs. So you've got unidentified flying objects that eventually can be explained because they're weather balloons or there's something like that. But then there are these things, these experiences that people have that they attribute to some sort of foreign entities that have powers that seem to go beyond that we have. And so he's thought that a lot of times he noticed in places where they have heavy preaching of the occult, like in Russia, he experienced it years ago, I guess, where people have lots of occult practices. They're seeing more of these unidentified, they're having more encounters with these supposed aliens or these beings that are able to harm them in some ways. And so I'm just wondering if anyone's given some thought to that, because that's going to make it a little more spicy today.
I think the government is brainwashing people to believe in aliens. I'm sure there are people seeing like UFOs and stuff. I think it's just human technology, personally. And as far for like the worldviews go, well, I'm a Christian, so obviously I think Christianity is the best worldview. I agree with what the Bible says, is like there's many paths or many roads that lead to destruction. Enter the narrow gate, that's the path of life. So I think that's talking about Christ, obviously, is the only path to life, and every other path you take will lead to death and destruction. I wholeheartedly believe that, but I wouldn't say there's any objective like fact in the world I could point to say that like Christianity is truer than any other like major worldview. So if like all the competing major worldviews, I'd say they're pretty much on par with each other. And for me to say like atheism is better or Christianity is better, I would just be using like a subjective metric or an arbitrary standard. So yeah, personally, I do think Christianity is better, but I don't think I could say that objectively, I guess.
I do think a lot of these UFOs and these UFO sightings might be demons. We simply do not know. We don't actually know what's going on, actually. But I do think there are evil forces out there, and I think that's one reason why a person should get in the know. I think religion is, well, um, I, in this way, in a very broad way, I don't think Christianity is a religion. It is and isn't. It has some characteristics of a religion, but it also has a way to be verified and falsified through the resurrection of Jesus. Paul speaks about this in 1 Corinthians 15. So the resurrection, the earliest witnesses were using that as something empirical that could be tested, that a person could actually go to the tomb, and there were witnesses. He mentions up to 500. He's basically telling his audience to go out and interview some of these people. So there was a hostility towards Christianity in the very earliest church, and we know this by the Jewish leadership. It also happened in Jerusalem, and Paul was going out and persecuting Christians, and he was sent by the Sanhedrin, the very council that condemned Jesus. So you have this weird Jerusalem factor. This happened in Jerusalem. It's very unlikely. If you're going to make up something, you don't put in Jerusalem where it can be falsified. The crucifixion and resurrection happened in Jerusalem, and Paul and others were saying that this was actually true and could be verified or falsified per the claims. But as for Christianity as a whole, I think it explains a whole wealth of data that other worldviews like polytheism, the occult, atheism don't satisfactorily explain as well as Christianity.
Yeah, I like your point about it's falsifiable, because I think that's a way to distinguish Christianity from just about every other faith. I think in some ways you could falsify a lot of faiths. Like if I want to go to Christianity, I say, if you can falsify the resurrection, which no one's been able to do, you can, like you said, produce a body. There's other evidence that could show us in a naturalistic way that there's some ancient explanation that people were offering to explain the resurrection, but they couldn't. And then you say, okay, let's go to the Muslim faith. Did Muhammad part the moon? Whatever you're supposed to do, split the moon. Well, do we have any data that show us Muhammad split the moon? Or you go to the Hindu faith or the Buddhist faith, where they say that the universe is in constant state of recycling. So it's creation, destruction, recycle, recycle. And so you could, if we had any evidence, instead we have the evidence for the Big Bang. And so that's very compelling as far as Genesis 1 and bringing us back to the Bible. So so far from what I'm seeing, I'm just naming 4. I haven't gone into Hellbound's belief system. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to falsify, but he said he's agnostic, so I'm not sure what that, but if there's a way to falsify maybe the belief system that you used to have, where I believe you were kind of leaning towards the occult and paganism.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously there's a lot of beliefs that I hold that I would consider to be subjective. They're not objective because there's no way that they can be proven. You can't, some things you just can't measure. When I talk to Christians and we get into a deep discussion about what is God, and it gets to a certain point where it's kind of like, well, it comes down to faith. And so that is where it comes down to. It comes down to a certain point where it's between you and your particular belief, your subjective understanding.
Let me push back a little on that.
Sure.
Because I don't think we have to prove something for it to be objective.
Oh, you mute.
For example, we can't. Well, we start with properly basic beliefs or things we have good reason to believe. Like, we can't prove the existence of the external world. We just use it as a commonsensical first principle of common sense as we function and live. The same way with we're talking to other minds and not a computer program. We can't prove it, but we have good reason to believe. So I would say knowledge is something we have good reason to believe. The external world actually existing, or other minds actually existing. But we can't mathematically prove them. But we nonetheless have good reason to believe those things. That's where I think a lot of atheists, and not saying you're an atheist or anything, but that's where I think a lot of atheists and agnostics get this wrong. They look at faith as, or biblical faith, as something you have to know for certain. Um, and I'll just say, I don't know if Christianity is true for certain, but I don't know if anything is true for certain. We base things. Sorry for my dog. We base things off probability, and I think we can be justified in saying that Christianity is true because of the early evidence for Christianity, the the Jewish leadership not being able to produce a body, even though they had ample time and had uh, the crucifixion was in Jerusalem. They could have. They sent Paul. They probably sent more. It seems to me that when I look at the overall picture, even though I can't prove Christianity is true, I can have good, solid reasons for thinking God raised Jesus from the dead.
Well, Kierkegaard said Christianity was offensive to reason because we have to. The way he put it? Let me see here. Let me look this up real quick. What is it?
While you're looking at that, I was just going to say one of the big things is with Christianity is if you ask an atheist or an agnostic, or even if we ask Hellbound here and we say, Hellbound, if you found evidence that Jesus resurrected from the cross, resurrected, would you believe in Christianity? Would you worship Jesus? And so what would you answer to that question? If you had solid evidence, you were compelled to believe, you felt that there's no other way to explain the data, what would you do?
I think if there was evidence of the miracles that are supposed to have happened in the Bible, if there's a lot of things if I look at the Bible, and I don't mean to offend anyone here if I do, but I look at the Bible as a collection of a lot of myths, and there's a lot of wisdom in the Bible, but a lot of it is analogy, allegory. That's how I perceive it. So I think that the story of Jesus is an analogy, and that's how I perceive it. So I don't personally believe that all the miracles that happened in the Bible actually happened. Now, if there was some way that I could see that the miracles and the things in the Bible that supposedly happened actually did happen, yeah, I think that would definitely that would definitely give me pause to reconsider it. But I also believe that a supreme, perfect being would not want someone to worship it unless that particular being did want to worship it. So, and I'm not saying that anyone is right now, but if you were going to put a sword to someone's throat and say, you have to worship Allah or you have to worship God or I'm going to kill you, that's not worship. That's just conversion by threat. And I don't think I don't think that's what a supreme perfect being would want anyone to do. I think a supreme perfect, yeah, exactly.
Well,
a
Jesus
perfect being would want
that. He told in the first few hundred years, Christians were entirely peaceful. They were being, they were being. Hey, Josh, can you just, when you're not talking, just because the dog, just put that on. But that's I just want to kind of, just like Josh was able to push back just a little bit here, because Jesus, if you look at his life and you look at how Christianity came to be, it was a very peaceful movement up until the time when people took it on in the Crusades and that. But well before that, you spend the first few hundred years where Christians were being heavily persecuted. And Jesus told them, he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. And then you compare that to your Allah example with the way the Muslims developed their faith. They were warriors from the get-go. Muhammad killed a whole bunch of Jewish people himself. And so you've got those examples just coming into play in an entirely different way. So I think we've got evidence from Jesus that this is a very peace-loving religion, and you don't have to. We are not commanded to go out there and forcefully convert people, or if you don't convert to Christianity, you will die. Although some people, of course, have taken it the wrong way.
Charlemagne did exactly.
Yeah,
that.
well, I'm saying we've got a history of some people doing it the wrong way, but that's certainly not what Jesus told us to do in the Bible. There's no call that says go out there. It says share the good news. It doesn't say go out there and kill anybody who's an infidel.
But I think what you said about miracles.
Well, can I just push back on Charlemagne? Because Charlemagne, when he was crowned Holy Roman Empire, there were all types of people and groups that were coming after him. So yeah, he didn't act perfectly Christian, but he was defending his empire, and this was in the year 770 to 811. He was defending the Holy Roman Empire. So
no, he went and force converted a bunch of pagans, and he said, if you don't convert, I will kill you. And he slaughtered a bunch of people that didn't convert.
Yeah, I'm not denying
that's wrong.
And I think
I
could be mistaken, but I think Charlemagne started out as a pagan and then converted to Christianity. Yeah. Is that correct?
Yes. And I'm not. I just want to say that nowhere did I deny that. I'm saying that he also was defending the Holy Roman Empire from all types of groups that were seeking to invade him. The first, he was big on learning. Women also had the ability to learn under him. He started so many schools. Aquin was one of the greatest thinkers of that time that helped him. So the Christianity was peaceful for the longest time.
Josh, what is going on with your dog? My gosh.
I'm not sure. My dog, two dogs, Honey and Sugar, they're in the other room. They're going crazy for some reason.
But I'd push back. Like, I think it's kind of ridiculous to say you want evidence for miracles, because if you have evidence for miracle, then it's not a miracle. So it's just kind of definitionally like ridiculous to say that.
Well, I don't agree with that, because we do have evidence for some miracles, even in modern times. But I want to go back to Hellbound, because Harry Stark is kind of wanting more information.
Evidence is repeatable. We can't repeat miracles.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you can't repeat that. You're right. So Harry Stark wants to know a little more. Hellbound, if Jesus appeared to you right in front of you today, like came up to you, he's definitely Jesus. He did 20 miracles right in front of you. He proved beyond a doubt that he's Jesus. What would you do at that point? After you've been completely convinced, yes, this is Jesus standing in front of me. Then what do you do?
Well, I apologize, because now I have a person sawing in my yard. I don't know if you can hear that.
He would just think it's a hallucination or something.
Yeah, right. No. If Jesus, if I was given a reasonable cause to believe in God, then of course I would. But it would have to be reasonable, and it would have to have no other explanation. You know what I mean? Like, I know that there are people that they'll see something, they'll look up at the sky and they'll see birds or clouds or whatever, and they will perceive, they will divine something from that. They will project into that and see what they want to see. So that's not what I'm talking about. And it sounds like that's not what you're talking about either. But if Jesus suddenly just poof, right appeared in my room right now, here, yes, of course I would convert. But I don't believe that that's going to happen. And, I think
I don't think you would. I think you would just think it's a hallucination.
Well,
because how do you know?
That's your opinion.
That's the problem, though. Because if Jesus appears poof in front of you and starts talking, how do you know that's Jesus? You have to test to see if that's Jesus. So you're still in the same situation, I think, that you are now.
SJ, isn't that the question you posed to me?
No, I'm saying that he's convinced it's absolutely Jesus. There's nobody else it could possibly be. He's exhausted all of their explanations. My question is, would Hellbound be number one, happy? And number two, would you worship him? Just real quick, yes, no. Yes, I'd be super thrilled, or I mean, you'd be bummed out. What would your reaction be?
No, well, my answer hasn't changed. If Jesus suddenly appeared right next to me in my apartment, yes, I would convert to Christianity. But that's not going to happen.
Interesting. Does anyone else want to comment on that? You guys want to follow up?
Yeah. I wanted to say, I do think the other gentleman, I don't know your name.
P. Mars.
Okay. I think you raised a great point, that lots of people would throw up. I'm not talking about anyone here, but some people, a lot of people would throw up alternative explanations like, well, it must be an illusion because miracles don't happen. We can't believe a miracle no matter what the evidence is. I believe I've dialogued with some people who've thought that. Also, a miracle, I think we can be justified if it happens repeatedly, in the presence of various witnesses, and if it's even appealing to skeptics and non-believers. I look at the resurrection of Jesus. James, the brother of Jesus, was not a Christian. Then he suddenly became a Christian after the crucifixion, resurrection. You had Paul, who was a skeptic. So you have these various things that are happening, especially in the early church, when I mentioned that it all happened in Jerusalem, which is very unlikely because, it's very unlikely if it was a hoax, because that's the place where the Jewish authorities could falsify earliest Christianity. When you look at the Gospels themselves, they are not of the genre of myth, but of ancient biographies, very similar to Plutarch or Lucian or Tacitus, very similar to those. So I think we have every reason to believe some of these people that wrote the Gospels, namely Luke. He showed in his very early chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, that he could write as a professional historian. You have these creedal statements in the Gospels and in Paul's letters that predate the actual events of the resurrection, the crucifixion and resurrection. So I'm sorry, that the writings. So the gospel writings, they predate the gospel writings.
Josh, that's a great point. I mean, you definitely made some good points there.
Thank you.
So just giving us a lot of the history and the mystery as far as coming out of Jerusalem. Like two things is that I just got coming in. I've got Jimmy who just joined us. It looks like PMARS had to drop out for a second. So I'm going to say welcome to Jimmy. And then after Jimmy says hello and lets us know about him, because I don't think I know Jimmy unless I'm mistaken. I've got this question here from Digital Hammurabi for each of you to consider. So Jimmy, what's your story?
I'm an agnostic. I've been on twice, but I don't think I've been on camera.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, welcome, Jimmy.
Yeah, it's turned into quite an interesting discussion, so I decided to jump on.
There we go. Okay. So good. So Digital Hammurabi, that's Dr. Josh, who's written a book called Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament, which I haven't read, but now I just read Jonathan McClatchy's review of what's his name? J. Warner Wallace's latest book. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff that's flying around in my head right now that I want to address from that. But anyway, beyond that, his question here, if you are presented with irrefutable evidence that the historical or prophetic claims in the Hebrew Bible were incorrect, what would your response be? Does anyone want to answer that? So I guess there's only one person besides me who believes those claims in there. So I guess for you guys in the bottom, you'd probably say, well, I already don't believe it. So, I mean, what would you say if you want to?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't believe in the Bible, but that's one of the reasons why I don't follow it. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to question things. You have to ask what is going on, and I think that's growth. I've done that throughout my life. I still do it today. I challenge myself, challenge my questions. Other people challenge me, and I think that when you can separate the wheat from the chaff, you come out on top, because now whatever belief you hold is provable. It's objective, and from there you can go forward. If you want to just believe in subjective truth, and that gets you through life, then that's great, if that's what you want out of it.
Well,
I don't see why one would have to stop being a Christian if some of that was proven false.
That's interesting. Yeah. Josh, what do you think? That's actually, that's a point right there. Do you say, do we actually need the Bible for Christianity to be true? What if Diocletian had destroyed every single Bible on the planet when he was in his quest to destroy all these Bibles in the late 3rd century? What if he was successful? And all Bibles were gone from the earth. So what would we do then?
Or Decius before them, or so many other
Domitian,
emperors.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or Nero.
And Decius also before him. But before I answer Dr. Josh's question, I think it's fair, since you actually wrote that book, what type of evidence would make you be a Christian?
Yeah, well, here's what because he wrote that book, and because I did open up this conversation talking a little teeny bit about this, I have noticed, and I just shared this, I'm in a Christian group right now, and I just met with a whole bunch of other Christians faculty at the University of Texas, Tyler, and at University of Florida an hour and a half ago. And I was telling them about some of the trends that I've noticed in academia over the past couple of 100 years that I think a lot of Christians, even Christian faculty members who are not involved in theology or religion or history, Christian history, and that kind of background, I've noticed the trends are, number one, the assumption is, okay, there cannot be any miracles in the Bible, or there can be no prophecies, because if there are fulfilled prophecies, then it must mean that somebody has knowledge that goes beyond human capacity. And so then the question is, okay, where does this knowledge come from? Well, it logically comes from God. So then you have somebody back in first you've got Porphyry positing that Daniel was written during Antiochus Epiphanes in 165 because he feels that Daniel said something that Antiochus he brought to life. And so that whole claim tried to get rid of Daniel, pull him out of the 6th century and put him into 165. And then there's a new one with, it's not even new, but with Isaiah, and this idea of Proto-Isaiah, then Deutero-Isaiah, then Trito-Isaiah. And this idea comes from somebody who was around 1145 AD, who decided, wait a second, it's not possible that Isaiah, who was around around 700 BC, it's not even possible because he was around with the Assyrians. How could he have known about King Cyrus in Babylon around 539? Clearly, this must be some other edition. It can't have possibly been Isaiah. So they decided that Isaiah must have 3 parts that were written so that you can get rid of any sort of prophecies. And I see the same thing going on with the book of Moses. Books of Moses.
And a lot of things happen about with Jesus predicting his death, giving various predictions. And actually there's good evidence because his predictions are on many different strata that are found in Mark and Matthew. And early attestation confirms, those. They're supported by various criteria of authenticity. So a lot of these, being skeptical of Isaiah or Daniel or Jesus's predictions about his death, a lot of these, and I think this can't be stated too much, they come from an anti-supernaturalistic bias that says that we can't or that history cannot reveal a miracle. We have to work from the assumption that miracles do not happen. And that assumption, may need to be removed because of the evidence that we do have for Jesus predicting his miracles, or that Isaiah or Daniel being early and only one author. So I think a lot of this is driven by an unreflective skepticism that is simply, without support and flies in the face of the specific evidence that we do have.
Yeah, good. I wanted to also thank you. I agree with you on those points. I want to also welcome Rob from Sentinel Apologetics. Just to add, Rob is very familiar with a lot of this stuff and has written himself on the book of Daniel after extensive investigation. And so he's a good person to come in here and comment as well. And if he wants to talk about other topics too, that's fine. So hi, Rob.
Hey, SJ, it's been a while. God bless you.
I know.
Yeah, and I've definitely written quite a bit on Daniel, even though it's not really my area of expertise, but that was a fun exercise just because I just wanted to see. Because I know Dr. Josh made a series on it, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to look into this myself. And there's a few things that I'm still waiting on Dr. Josh in a roundabout way for Dr. Collins to get back with in regards to certain things, like certain Hebrew words and terms. And I can actually also point out a very, very, as of a couple of weeks ago, published paper on Xenophon's Cyaxares, or Cyaxares, uncle of Cyrus, friend of Daniel, by Roger C. Young. It's in Jets 2021. And
Jets 2021, Journal of what?
The Evangelical Theological Society.
Okay.
It is a there are some papers that can give off too much of an evangelical, flavor to it. But what I can do is I can share with you the Chrome tab of the title of the paper if Dr. Josh is interested in tracking this down. And Roger Young actually worked with Stephen Anderson, the guy who wrote the paper on his dissertation where he was arguing about Darius the Mede. And after reading through this paper, I think Roger Young has done a brilliant job down here in his conclusion with these bullet points. And later on, I don't have to go through it now, but I'm happy to.
Well, I want to ask you, I definitely want to ask you about that, because I've been trying to look into Cyrus and Darius the Mede, because of course Daniel references Darius right after he references taking Belshazzar. Belshazzar was killed the night after he saw the writing on the wall. And then it said Daniel also references Cyrus and other blinks in the same book. And so I'm just wondering, I know we don't have the other evidence, as far as I know, to support Darius the Mede. So I've been waiting for some sort of archaeology like the Nabonidus cylinder to come breathing out of the ground to share that with us. But what is this? What is he proposing?
Well, I think instead of going through all the weeds, this is literally the best summarization I've seen, where he, this is 2021. This is gonna be coming out soon. So I'm actually reading before it's actually even published. You're actually seeing it. Everyone through your stream now is seeing it. So
this isn't even published yet? How'd you find it?
No. It's published. They're just waiting for it to be printed, and it's finished. It's accepted. So for example, I even bought myself. Where is it? Where does he say this? Down here somewhere. Here. So in footnote 34, if you go up here,
I can sort of see Darius the Mede in that footnote, so I can't wait to hear it.
Sure. I'm sort of this is sort of like giving you a tracking down with the whole
nice
bibliographic list I compiled, and there's a Daniel commentary I was waiting for. I was just wanting to check that out because I know the guy is going to be tracking on the scholarship, and it was going to be published through Lexon, which happens to be the publisher for a lot of Heiser's works as well. And so category 7, Cyaxares is expunged from history, and footnote 34. And then he's going to go now into the Xenophon's account, blah blah blah. And so before, he's going to summarize the details. But under 34, you'll see him speak about that the reference in the following section to 1800 years of scholarship that accepted the identification of Darius the Mede with Cyaxares II are taken largely from this research of Stephen D. Anderson, and that's the guy that Dr. Josh is very good friends with, actually. Like, they both study together. Whose PhD dissertation at Dallas investigated the historical archaeological arguments supporting this identification. So what I then was wanting to see was any sort of like critical engagement with that dissertation by a scholar who happens to be specializing in Daniel. And, well, H. Wayne House and William D. Barrick for the Evangelical Exegetical Commentary, which is not a slouch. This is legitimate scholarship. His Daniel commentary came out in 2020 and was more or less engaging literally toe-to-toe with Golden Gay's commentary, which also Golden Gay released a second edition. So the guy that was engaging it was J. Paul Tanner. And absolutely amazing. Just really just incredibly detailed commentary. So he's going toe-to-toe with Golden Gay and also Collins. And then, to my surprise, and even to Roger's surprise, is that he's like, look, a recent commentary finds Anderson's arguments compelling. And this is... I got the commentary just as it was published. I basically flipped to the pages dealing with Darius, and sure enough, Tanner was he just expanded on it, and he's like, look, I think a lot of Anderson's comments are very helpful, let's expand on them. So in other words, he was sort of like adding on top of what Anderson was arguing for. And so then he also noticed this as well. The scholar here that's writing about this. By the way, Roger is more of a chronologist. That's his specialization. He's more of a mathematician and a chronologist. And he's taken a huge interest in biblical chronology. So with that sort of skill set in mind, so then he summarizes quite beautifully then, if you were to do literally a comparison between the summarization of what Anderson was getting at with Tanner with respect to the details in the book of Daniel, that's this table here, where if you go along with Xenophon's Cyropedia and then the Darius the Mede according to Daniel, it's like a point-for-point overlap. So, for example, current consensus among conventional historians is that he did not exist, this individual. However, no adequate motive is given for why Xenophon created the supposedly imaginary figure. Now let's look at Daniel. Current consensus among non-conservative biblical critics is that Darius did not exist. However, no adequate motive is given for why the author of Daniel would create him. A contemporary of Cyrus the Great, so this individual is a contemporary of Cyrus the Great, which is his uncle. And how interesting, in Daniel, yeah, he's a contemporary of Cyrus the Great. This particular individual... Yeah,
let me just get his uncle.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you, does it mean that Darius the Mede is the uncle of Cyrus? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Am I reading that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because Cyrus is supposed to have one parent who's a Mede and one parent who's a Persian, so it's completely realistic.
Sure.
Obviously, it could be a relative of the Mede.
And so here you have a reference that he's known as King of the Medes, Daniel 5:31, King of the Medes. He had authority over the Persians as late as shortly after the capture of Babylon in 539 BC. also had authority over the Persians shortly after the capture of Babylon in 529 BC, as evidenced by his decree in Daniel 6. Died within 2 years after the capture of Babylon, succeeded by Cyrus. Died not long after the capture of Babylon, succeeded by Cyrus, in Daniel 10:11. Only one name given, although Josephus said that Darius was called by another name among the Greeks. Only one name given, although other kings during this time had a given name as well as a throne name. A reputation for being violent and unreasonable and disproportionate anger. Vainglorious, Cyrus could change his course of action if offered something that would bring him greater praise and wealth. Also vainglorious, his counselors recognized this, persuading him to issue an edict that would make him the focus of everyone's prayers. And, he goes on and on in the conclusion, but this...
That looks great.
This is before, I know I made a video on it, sort of I did find it quite difficult to really summarize the very complicated issues that Anderson was raising and Tanner was raising. But Roger has done an even better job in this bullet point summarization than what I've done in my series, so yeah.
Well, I appreciate that you shared that, because for some reason, the book of Daniel is just one of those books that just fascinates me. I've read it and listened to it a zillion times, it seems like right now.
Sure.
So that's one area that I hadn't been able to, the Darius the Mede versus, because I've seen different theories, as I'm sure you have. But so is he positing?
If you want to read the paper, there's the link in the private chat if you want to read it in your
I will definitely get that. But let me just ask you this. Is he positing that, so is he positing that Darius and Cyrus co-reigned, or is he positing that Darius preceded Cyrus and maybe Cyrus didn't come around till 537?
No. Darius the Mede is... Oh, I talk about Cyrus.
Yeah. So Cyrus
sorry,
and Darius,
sorry.
or Darius.
Yeah. I'll need to check up on that, actually, because I'm sort of having a memory blank. I don't think they reigned together, but I'll need to check up on that. The point is, or maybe they did. The point is, I'm more focused on identifying Darius the Mede, and here's Stephen D. Anderson, it's not the Stephen Anderson of that church. That, he's sort of he just hey, look, I'm making this connection. It's a pretty wild connection. And one of the most scholarly evangelical Daniel commentaries that have just been published, literally during COVID last year, after 10 years in the making, has now sort of supported that view, and now papers after all this published material is sort of now engaging with it, and it's engaging with it positively as well. So
nice.
Yeah.
I'm glad you provided, because I haven't read Xenophon, so there's somewhere I missed. I would have just gone back and seen that. Maybe I could have drawn some of those parallels too. So I'm glad that somebody did the legwork for us.
Mm-hmm.
Has anyone?
That's the thing is, you just need a lot of memory to remember all. It's a whole different ballgame when you're dealing with this culture. I mean, I'm more used to, say, other stuff with the Old Testament, and also maybe also New Testament stuff, but this area is so specialized. Yeah.
It is, well, the tough part is, and what I've been trying to do lately is, and I think it's going to the chronology like what you're talking about, but I realized when I was looking at the Old Testament, I needed to put it all on a timeline. And lately when I've been doing my videos, I've been going back to explain the timeline, because there's so many characters involved, so many different people and so many different stories, that if you can't put it in your mind in some some sequence, it's going to be super hard to comprehend.
Exactly, yeah. And especially in this regard, where you have this particular individual as at first appearing quite obscure, and sort of the name being a little bit off and weird, and hence throwing a wrench in the work, so to speak, and the reason why then scholars are sort of throwing their hands up and going, oh, maybe it's fiction. But if you just tease out the details a little bit, it doesn't seem to be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Good, cool stuff. I like that you're keeping up with scholarship. You're doing better than I am. I haven't been keeping up with that scholarship. I've got other guys. Oh, we lost Josh. Maybe he'll come back. So, no, that's fascinating stuff.
Oh, no. I wanted
So
to
any
talk to
direction you
Josh.
guys want to go to here? We've got a kind of a mixed group of people in here. So
I wanted to say that I've noticed, I don't know if anybody else has, that Rob is spending a lot of time in the desert being tempted by Satan. I've noticed that every time.
And every
See
time I
Rob
tell
on
Satan,
YouTube.
thou shalt not tempt the Lord, our God, because I'm not God. Like, yeah.
Rob, do you follow Rob's channel, Jimmy?
No, I just I see him on a couple of different channels a lot. So
I just saw
Yeah.
you, Rob. I didn't actually listen to the channel, but I was flipping around in YouTube and I noticed that you were just on Smoky Saint's channel.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of interaction with those guys more lately. I've been sort of in the middle of moving house, and I've sort of now settled in a new place. And
When you say
Yeah,
those guys, are you going back and forth between Smoky Saint and Standing for Truth and that whole little Praise That I Am and all those guys? There's a whole kind of crew of people.
Let's just say there's a lot of fruit that's been generated. So there was
really?
there's a lot of initial like heat and like tension, and talking past each other, but believe it or not, yeah, you have the young Earth creationist crowd. They're quite militant. I mean, you like, for example, the Ken Hovens of this world, and Standing has Ken Hoven on his channel a lot. But yeah, patience. Well, how does the saying goes? Like patience, like endurance, does its work or something like that. Like, yeah, Standing has sort of started to appreciate and become more friendly. There's this sort of like I know Smokey and those guys are still, they're still butt heads because Smokey is a little bit of he just speaks his mind. But I've been trying to like just have everyone, get together, I suppose. And yeah, so far the discussions are quite fruitful. But then there are, okay, here's the latest. Now the young Earth creationists and the non-young Earth creationists are teaming up, believe it or not, to now tackle even more cringe issues like flat Earth and all the weird, say, Jesus myth stuff, and
Yeah, go after the mythicists. That's what I think. That's
Sure.
important. I had a hilarious video by Trinity Radio that was directed to me in this last time I ran a channel, and it was funny. It's like a little 3-minute video that he made on Bart Ehrman versus other people on Jesus mythicism, like Aaron Ra. It's so funny. So
yeah.
no, let me point out
the
before you guys.
podcast is growing. Like,
What's that?
The Myth Vision podcast, that YouTube channel.
Oh, I know. I've been trying to get that guy
Yes.
on my channel, Derek.
It's about 30,000 subs now, and I'm not against all that. Like, speak your mind. Feel free to produce that material, but
I want that guy on my channel.
I'm sort of cringing now because it's like when I see him bring on legitimate scholars. I mean, even Dr. Josh has been on there, and Dr. Josh, I know, would disagree with a lot of the stuff that goes on that channel. He's had Heiser on there. He's had, like, for example, Mark Goodacre on there. A very good, prominent New Testament scholar. And then he brings on Dennis MacDonald, who's an interesting person in the sense he specializes in mimesis criticism, and himself is not a mythicist, but yet in the same room has Richard Carrier with Dennis. They both disagree, but then there's this very weird underlying bias on Derek's part, where this is just my observation, where he, like a puppy, is just like lapping it up, like, yeah, give me more, like spoon feed me more of your expertise in the Greek and the exegesis on the, why it's a myth. And I'm just thinking to myself, now you're just bordering on the content then is not really original to you. You're not really. In other words, it's like a radio show of let's just express the latest and weirdest idea, kind of like in Act 17. When Paul goes to Mars Hill and it says that they're debating the latest ideas and what's on your mind today. And I mean, it's sort of going in that trajectory. And I mean, you do you, I suppose, but if you're gonna have scholars seriously engage with that, good luck, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have, before I just want to rewind just a little bit too to what you said before. All of those guys, whether it's Smokey or it's CJ or it's Standing for Truth, Donnie, I like all of those guys. I get along with all of them. I've had them all on my channel at different times. I don't know how it'd be to have them all on at once. That could be really funny. But it's nice when you can get people together, even if we have differing thoughts and differing backgrounds. None of these things are, if you're a Christian, whether or not you believe in a young earth or an old earth, I don't believe that's going to be the gateway to get you through the door to heaven. It's if you believe in Christ's resurrection. Sure. And so I'll just say that. But yeah, going off on the tangent.
By the way, just to clarify in the comments, I didn't say Derek is a mythicist. There are mythicists on his show that he is not afraid to have as a prominent primary voice. The non-mythicists on the show, there's a variation, there's a gradient of the sort of like, I suppose, recommendation on his mind. I know for a fact that he would rather have someone like Richard Carrier or Robert Price as the primary voice, even though he himself is not a mythicist.
So why does he call his show Myth Vision? I haven't watched him that much.
Because
I have to be honest.
It's not again myth, because it's to do with the word. It's not, the word doesn't mean. For example, I believe the Bible is myth, right? In the genre of myth, like say Tolkien's myth.
Some of it,
like
yeah.
Even Tolkien said Christianity is the true myth. With the eucatastrophe stuff, like.
But people see that in different, like people will define myth differently.
And that's the subtle nuance that he's working with in order to then shoehorn in a cosmic sperm bank carrier stuff, that Jesus is from outer space, literally from some cosmic sperm bank, and
so ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's just.
I've watched that, guys. I know who you're talking about now.
Richard Carrier?
Those no, Myth Vision podcast.
Oh, Myth Vision. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that guy was a mythicist as well until Rob just explained.
Yeah, I did too. I haven't watched him enough.
Yeah,
I just watched him enough to see. I wanted him on my channel. That's.
That channel is all over the place then. Yeah.
Well, he's been getting a lot of. I mean, he runs his channel a lot. He's on there quite frequently. I want to say it's almost daily. He's got something going on. It seems like.
See, when J. Mike says, I'm not a mythicist, but it isn't a clear cut, yes, Jesus definitely existed. That is just putting way too much stock into a lack of contemporary evidence. Notice the language in this, right? So, for example, John Mayer, the guy who wrote 5 volumes on...
Oh, jeez. Sorry, now my dog's doing it.
So he wrote A Marginal Jew on the Historical Jesus. 5 volumes. Over a period of, 20 years now, I think. And I just love how he opens his first book back in the early 90s, volume number 1, about all the various scholars in various fields in the humanities in the Harvard Library, trapped. Maybe there's an earthquake, or maybe there was a fire, maybe, in other words, they're trapped for like a week there or something in the Harvard Library, and to sort of pass the time, they're given the task of debating the history of Jesus, and what would be the consensus, and 99% of the scholars would say Jesus existed. So.
Yeah, I mean, imagine.
Hey, Dr. Kip.
Imagine holding the position Jesus didn't exist. I mean, think of the material that we don't have for Jesus. I mean, there has to be a lot out there that we don't have, right?
Like
Well, if you
everything.
figure you've got like Domitian, Diocletian, you've got a lot of emperors who were around who did destroy on the punishment of death, people who were retaining some of that information, some of their scriptures. So
Sure.
I want to say
Oh,
hi
I
to
didn't know
Dr.
that.
Kip too. I don't know if I've had Dr. Kip
Kip.
on here concurrently with Rob, and I know I haven't had him concurrently with
spoken
Jimmy.
with-
So
Yeah.
welcome everybody.
I've spoken with Kip
Yeah.
before, yeah.
We were here together, SJ,
Oh, okay.
correcting you on your errors about Psalm 22:17 that you continue to propagate for some reason. I don't know why. Once
Because I believe I'm
You've been
correct, Kip. I don't
correct. You're
believe
not-
your
you're just-
arguments are compelling. I'm sorry. They just don't. They're not compelling to me at all. So
I think you're just ignoring the obvious. I wanted to. Well, I mean, the one thing we didn't talk about was with regards to that passage, and something that you've never dealt before is the orthographic argument. Do you even know what that is?
what is it?
The orthographic argument is the reason for long spelling in certain words in certain instances, and it would be the reading that you want from the Nachal Hever Psalm scroll in order to match the translation that you want. That's a totally separate matter, but the reading that you want depends on an orthographic argument that you cannot support. And the reason for this is because within Hebrew manuscripts, orthography, the difference between long spelling and short spelling is not something that just sort of is thrown around willy-nilly by a scribe whenever he feels like it. Scribes in the Second Temple period are particular about when they employ long spelling versus short spelling. And the big problem with the Nachal Hever Psalm scroll is that all the spelling in it is extremely short, even shorter than the Masoretic text. And if it's got short spelling in it, then there's no way that Kedu will be spelled with an aleph. So that's the argument, and it's a fairly irrefutable argument. I don't know a single specialist who would beg to differ on that fact. But I did,
Dr. Kip,
Yeah.
just to clarify, I'm not a specialist as far as orthography and all that stuff, but I remember reading.
I'm aware.
Oh. Sorry.
Anyways,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
know. Yeah. But I remember watching a 2004 lecture on Gnosticism by Heiser, like a whole 6-hour sort of like thing he did, and he spoke about, is it the Gospel of Philip that speaks about apparently like Jesus kissed Mary, as what the Da Vinci Code was trying to argue. I think it could be the Gospel of Philip or some apocryphal
idea.
gospel that you have the line Jesus something, it's like blank, and then Mary.
Oh, that's
And then it
that's
says on the-
Gospel of Judas.
Oh, Gospel of Judah. Okay.
Yeah.
And Heiser passes remark. So when you were saying that, I was sort of thinking of this, where he said that scholars literally measure the spacing and maybe the size of each letter that could fit in the spacing. Like they go down to
Absolutely.
that detail. Like, is that sort of similar to what you're getting at with?
Well, it's different in this case, but that's absolutely something that scholars do when it comes to reconstructions within fragmentary manuscripts. But the point I'm getting at is that within the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have longer spelling conventions where vowel letters will appear frequently within words that ordinarily don't have them. So, for example, Elohim is spelled Aleph Lamed Mem Yod Mem, right? But within some scrolls, you'll have it spelled Aleph Lamed Vav Hey. Yeah, I said that wrong, didn't I? It's Aleph Lamed Hey Yod Mem. Sorry. So, but within some scrolls, which retain a longer spelling, it will be spelled Aleph Lamed Vav Hey Yod Mem. So that that Vav letter, and the Vav letters the vowel letters are like Vav, Yod, and sometimes Aleph. So those vowel letters will appear in some manuscripts, as a means to, it's thought to aid in pronunciation. We honestly don't know why they're there, but that tends to be the going idea now. So the argument,
is it because of the vowel pointings? It's something to do with before the vowel pointings are introduced.
Yeah, there's no vowel pointings at this point in time, right? And it's generally thought that the shorter text without the vowel letters is the older text, and the one with the letters is like a contemporized version. And that too is it's a theory. It's not an extremely strong theory.
You see, this is exceedingly okay. I'll just throw another. I think now you're sort of like in a very roundabout way clarifying something from a totally different area in the Hebrew Bible. So
I'm happy to.
Deuteronomy 32:8, the B'nai El. I was reading in the in one of Bar's Biblical Archaeological Review readers segment, like when people voice their opinion and then the scholars like engage with the questions. So there was one person that was asking, "Hey, I read your paper, your article on the sons of Israel versus the sons of God in the Dead Sea Scrolls," and he said that the Masoretic scribe took the abbreviations of the consonants B'nai El, and you can actually see it, and you can literally make the mistake as reading it as B'nai Yisrael. And I'm wondering if that's sort of, because then you're adding, on top of that, you're adding consonants. You're making the words longer, but then the reading is different, and you come up with a totally different reading.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that's also sort of similar to what you're saying.
That could be. I don't know if it works in this particular passage though, and I'm just gonna look at the picture here of one of the fragments. If you just give me
I'll also bring up.
I'll
I'll just screenshot his argument as well. It's only a one-line sentence he wrote. Sorry, SJ, for. I hope this is not.
Yeah, I should
No, it's all good.
apologize for that too.
I probably have about 15. I just want to mention I probably have about 15 minutes left, so I can't go too long because I heard my son just got home. One of them, the other one sick today. We thought he had COVID, but we got him tested and he doesn't have COVID, so we're happy.
Yeah, this is horrible. Like, wait, the Delta variant?
Yeah, no, we just went out and took a COVID, one of those. We can buy a little test at the Walgreens, so we bought a home COVID test because he's coughing, but he doesn't have COVID. Apparently, he just got a cough.
Okay.
My one son, my other son just got home from school, so I was just gonna.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna, if I can quickly just share my screen to show something, that'd be great. Share screen. I'll just do the entire screen.
So while you're doing that, I want to say hi to people in the chat too. So Slam, Otangelo, J Mike, good seeing all you guys. Whoever else is in here. If I missed somebody, sorry if I missed you. Blaster Master, Zeng Fukusheng. What else do we have here? Dr. Josh earlier asking his question. Okay, so I need to probably put this into the.
So, do you see it?
Can you? I can see it. Can you guys see it?
So.
Yep, that's actually it. That's a 32.8, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I don't. You can't really make the argument that you're making with this reading. I don't think.
Okay.
Because it's B'nai Elohim here, and I mean this is the. We don't have any manuscripts that preserve a reading with B'nai El. maybe there is a reading out there.
He
but
mentioned-
as far
okay,
as
he
we know,
mentions-
this is what's there.
He mentioned something to do with the Stuttgartensia having an actual, based on an actual reading as L, like Bene L.
No, it's lots of times what you get in Stuttgartensia, and I'm just pulling it up here to see, but lots of times what you get in there are hypothetical readings.
Okay.
So an editor will say, it probably read this originally. I'm just looking up to see what it says here. 32:8 says 7. Yeah, it says. Okay, so we have Qumran, Septuagint, and then some other witnesses. And it suggests here, yes, it's probably originally read Bene El, and then Bene Elim, but there's no actual manuscripts that preserve that reading.
I see.
So
okay.
it's a suggestion. But I guess before you go, SJ, I thought I did want to say something about Jesus mythicism, if I may.
Absolutely. Oh, wait, first, can I do one thing before?
Yeah.
I wanted to see if you guys, I don't know if I truly understand what you would want the audience to know about this Bene El or Bene Elohim.
Well,
Is there any
I'm
way
also
to
sharing my...
explain
I think
that
this can be a last clarifying point.
I just want to make sure everybody gets that, and then we can talk
I'm
about
not sharing.
mythicism.
So this is by Bernhard Lang when he's responding to that questionnaire, and then I was just wondering when he says, because he's going from the Stuttgartensia and he's like, look, you have this,
and I would
and then
say,
I'm thinking, oh, there's a yod, and I'm thinking,
as an abbreviation.
Exactly. Does it become that?
It's,
and are you making the sort of same argument? And
I would say I don't like that argument, and I don't like it because I don't think there are instances where that is an actual abbreviation anywhere else. And also, we've got the textual evidence from the Dead Sea Scrolls, which shows us what the original reading was, and the explanation to me seems pretty straightforward. And for those who are wondering what's going on here, the passage in Deuteronomy 32:8 originally read, Yahweh apportioned the nations according to the number of the sons of the God, sons of the gods. El apportioned the nations according to the sons of the gods, and Yahweh's portion is Jacob or Israel. We know that, or we're quite confident that this became an uncomfortable reading for Jews who were transcribing the text for obvious reasons. It shows the polytheistic roots of Israelite religion, and so a scribe at some point along the transmission process changed it from Bene Elohim to Bene Israel. So that's essentially the argument on what's going on here, and I think it remains the strongest explanation for the different versions, for what we read in the Dead Sea Scrolls, what we read in the Septuagint, which is Angelon Theo, the angels of God, as opposed to the sons of God or the sons of Israel. So,
and I like how Everett Fox translates it as, he just says very point blank, Everett Fox is, he's like, by the number of the gods. He's just
that's
it
it's
doesn't say sons
it's,
of El, but
the plainest, most obvious reading of the text.
You agree that this is how it should be read, like it's not, like not sons of Israel, because sons of Israel would be there is no Israel.
Israel wasn't even around then.
Exactly.
So it can't be sons of Israel.
It's a very strange.
See, Christians can look at this, and probably a lot of them do, and they never see it, and they think, oh my gosh, it's polytheistic. But on the other view, it's the idea of the word gods. It could be taken in a way that it's spiritual beings.
No, No, SJ, I cannot.
Well, that's what Heiser would
It's
say.
polytheistic. Well, I mean, Heiser's clearly got his own agenda here when dealing with these sorts of things. And I mean, within scholarship, it's a recognition of, a polytheistic milieu. So, and it's problematic on the face of it, because at that point, then you have to assign Yahweh to nothing more than, a divine being as opposed to a god.
But then,
because he's part of that group. Yeah.
Just a quick comment. Heiser's dissertation showing a, when you have El and Baal in two slots, and then Heiser's dissertation was all about, well, the Hebrew, the Israelite is taking El and putting Yahweh number 1 there, and Baal and making Yahweh number 2, and they are in hypostasis. And then Michael Fox, his doctorate advisor, is like, brilliant thesis. Like, in other words, polytheism is one piece of that very complex monolaterist faith that they already have.
I would agree.
And like a term like monotheism actually does a disservice, ironically enough, and I'm speaking as a Christian, to a genuine, what does it mean to be a Yahweh worshipper in light of the gods, right? So,
right,
yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah, I mean,
so
I can agree with that too.
Since we don't have too much time left, but I also saw Tangelo's in here, but Myth Vision just jumped in here, said he must have heard his ears ringing.
Yeah.
And Kip, you are going to talk about something with myths.
I was going to say something about Jesus mythicism in the context of what you guys were talking about. So I'm not a mythicist. I am in line with the very strong consensus view that there was an historical Jesus, but I think a lot of scholars who are within this view that there was an historical Jesus would also agree that the historical case for Jesus is not especially good. I mean, it's okay. It's sort of the best explanation for the available evidence, but the evidence itself is not especially strong. And I did want to say I found it kind of ironic to hear you guys poo-pooing on Jesus mythicism when a few minutes ago you were giving serious contemplation to ideas about the Book of Daniel stemming from the 6th century, which is an incredibly fringe position within scholarship. So and I kind of came in the middle of it, but I certainly know, SJ, that this is something you have talked at length about before. But if you're gonna poo-poo one scholarly position as fringe, and then plant your flag and die on the hill of another almost maybe nearly equally fringe position from scholarship, that strikes me as just a little bit disingenuous. So maybe a little bit more humility around.
Well, I don't think
right?
Kip, one of the things that you do that you seem to be doing here a little bit is you're assuming that I haven't done any sort of work in checking into the background of before I came to my decision on Daniel.
Yeah.
And I have done a lot
on this stuff numerous times, and you continue to propagate the same thing.
Well, the thing is, just like with Rob, who's also done a lot of work on Daniel and came to the same conclusion that Daniel was written in the 6th century BC. He's also, but I know that for some reason you're zeroing in on me. I know how to do academic research. I've done it for my PhD quite frequently. I write papers. I'm not out there just coming up with stuff that has no support. So,
SJ, if the stuff that you put out on your channel is representative of your academic research, I am not remotely impressed. I just have to say that.
Well, that's
It,
fine. I know you don't agree with what I say about, for example, I go back with Dr. Michael Brown's view on Psalm 22. He has also looked at the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he's also
he
looked at the
doesn't.
ancient languages.
I
He has a
guarantee
degree in the
you.
ancient
I
languages,
guarantee
and
you.
so
So do I. I guarantee you that he has not looked carefully at the orthography, because this is something that unless you're sitting with it, unless you're working within Dead Sea Scrolls and that's all that you're doing, this is likely not something that you know even. There's so many minutia within scholarship that it's impossible for every single scholar to stay on top of them all, which is why we need hundreds and hundreds of scholars doing work in hundreds and hundreds of different areas, because you can't do it all. So, I mean, this is right within my field of expertise. I am a Dead Sea Scrolls scholar. I specialize in scripts and text.
right. Well, Dr. Michael Brown has also looked at he doesn't look at the Dead Sea Scrolls. He's looked at the Septuagint.
Right.
He's looked at a whole bunch of other translations, and he's come to that conclusion.
And the Dead Sea Scrolls debunk all of that.
No, they actually don't. They provide support for it.
Do. SJ, I'm a Dead Sea Scrolls scholar.
So, okay, well, listen, I don't want to, Kip, I didn't come in here on a Monday just so I can sit and argue with you. I know you got on the channel and jumped in there with Psalm 22. That wasn't even something we were talking about today.
I didn't mean to. I honestly didn't mean to.
So, and I appreciate the insults on my own channel. That's usually not something that people will do, but I guess you decided you're going to just do that. So that's fine. That's fine if that's how you want to do it.
Improve your scholarship, SJ.
But can I just ask something about Daniel? I just want to clarify that I'm actually a both and as far as the Maccabean hypothesis and
I probably am too, in the sense that I think
that you have a proto-skeletal thing.
There's stuff in there that probably dates. I wouldn't go as far back as Babylon, but I think certainly within the Persian period you can make a case for some of it. And I will say that the Dead Sea Scrolls again rather strongly support this view of a developing collection of Daniel tales all the way up through the Maccabean period.
Well, what about what about the very peculiar usage of numbers? So in Golden Gate's second edition, which is just absolutely brilliant, and yet he still holds to a late date, but kind of like the final edition of Daniel, right? Where recent studies done on the peculiar numbers that Collins likes to say is an evolution of prophecy. But now when you do a little bit more investigation into very recent findings on Babylonian triples, so Babylonian Pythagorean triples, roughly, that how interesting a Maccabean author would not be using Babylonian triples in that period, rather to be more relevant to the period that it's in. And then Tanner's point in his commentaries that again recent studies done on the so-called the unity structure of the book as a whole. So you have the Hebrew and Aramaic portions, but then in other words, I'm not saying word for word and letter for letter the whole thing is only 6th century. You have an editorial process of the whole skeletal form of the book from the start moving forward, and then it finally has its final form in the Maccabean period. James Charlesworth, during the Enoch conference in 2010, I think it was, he interestingly proposed that they're dating Enoch to the 2nd and 3rd century BC, and Enoch is drawing from, the Babylonian mythical stuff from Daniel 7, right?
Yeah.
And therefore Daniel 7 has to predate that. And now it's like, we thought Daniel 7 was all to do with what's going on in the 1st and 2nd centuries, and because Enoch is drawing from that, right? So,
well, not necessarily. I mean, Nicholasberg made the argument that the direction is the other. It's going the other direction.
Oh, In his
Nichols-
Hermenea commentary,
Nichols-
yes, he says that,
yeah.
but in a very recent paper he's just published for Brigham Young University, which, by the way, he's not affiliated to that, but he spoke on that, yeah. But they're sort of like having to change their mind on that. And this is something Tanner has pulled together. To me, it doesn't matter, because everything, even if you have a late date, this is me to SJ. Even if you have a late date, this is what I told you before. A lot of the stuff is still applicable to the Jesus stuff happening in the 1st century with the temple destruction, and so.
It's just that
Anyway.
all I can say is that what I've seen, I
I'm
just
not one
find
for
compelling
tension.
for that date. So yeah, no, I'm not either. I was kind of having a fun time a little while ago and just kind of switched down and took a nosedive. But I want to say thank you guys for coming on the channel. Thank you to other people who were on here earlier today. I hope you guys will come again. No hard feelings on anybody. I do enjoy having different points of view and all that kind of stuff. I just like to keep it all friendly, so, and non-insulting. So.
Aw, cute dog.
This is my new one. So
I love dogs.
Yeah. Lisa just brought him home a couple weeks ago. It's Dagon, the abomination of the Philistines. Right? Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Anyway, thanks SJ. I appreciate it.
You guys want to mention what you're working on now or anything before, or where people can find you?
I will just mention that Josh, Dr. Josh and I are going to do a tag team. I mean, we're just kind of at the start of it, but we're putting together a tag team video response to one or maybe even two of the recent videos put out by Inspiring Philosophy. So stay tuned for that. And that's what's going on my end right now. Good. Take care, you guys.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Rob, what you have going on?
Hey, Myths Vision, since you're listening in, watch my series on the bedrock of Christianity. And I'm going to be releasing part 2. I haven't touched in a while purely because of life stuff, but on the appearances of Jesus. And I'm going to be arguing, thanks to a certain someone that you know, Robert Price, who referred to an evangelical scholar who published this either in the 90s or in the early 2000s, but all to do with the number 500. And I think his argument is brilliant, because everyone gets hung up on that 500 figure, and the argument is that the word 500 is gematria for holy. So in other words, he appeared to all the holy brethren, which means in Acts 2, when it describes the when Peter's giving that message and all these people are hearing it, I used to be in Bible study groups where even the people were wondering, what, is this happening in a house? And how are all these people listening to this all in a house? And the amazing thing is, no, it's not a house. They are on the Temple Mount, or they're in Jerusalem, where the temple is. And there's enough room, because that's where all the pilgrims go, and there's enough room for a large enough population to hear the message. So in other words, if you follow the chronology through, Pentecost is the 500 brethren, but it's not 500 as what we would read it as, the way we translate it, like you can actually count it as 500. Rather, it's just like the 666. It's gematria for something, right? So so literally the argument is, he appears to all these people, and then the 500. which is, guess what, chronologically is perfect because it fits Pentecost, which means then you can't put a limit to how many he appeared to. So we know Pentecost, a lot of people heard it, according to the story. And that's why when it says more than, that's sort of like a very interesting translational issue, because it's like more than 500. But if the scholar that makes the argument, he's like, look, I mean, you can actually translate it a different way, and it just says he appeared to all the holy brethren. And Dale Allison, actually, interestingly enough, mentions this paper as well. And it, if it's a pre-Pauline creed, it matches beautifully with the historicity of the event. So anyway, that's going to be in part 2, and maybe this week I'll release it, but I'm still sort of like fine-tuning it here and there, and yeah.
That's very cool. That's interesting. I've never even heard that, so sounds interesting. Something to dive into.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the thing about the Bible, is the more you look into it, the more complex it can be. It can be very simple and it can be very complex. It's got mid-level stuff, surface level stuff, and very deep things. And so I find it fascinating. So,
and God bless
thanks.
you, Esther.
Yeah, God bless you too. Thank you guys for coming in. Please like, subscribe, and do come again. And just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Thank you so much.